So welcome to this WiseOwl tutorial on working with VBA from within Python using the pywin32 module. So here's what you'll learn during the tutorial. We're going to begin by a fairly brief look at the component object model in VBA, explaining how it allows VBA applications to talk to each other, which means that Python applications can talk to VBA too. We'll then look at a couple of quick examples, one showing how to create a basic program in Excel VBA within Python, and another doing the same thing for Microsoft Word. We'll then look at a longer example in Excel, showing how you can take a full VBA program and translate it into Python, and some of the issues you'll encounter in doing that. We'll then spend the rest of the tutorial looking at an Outlook example, so I'll show a slight digression on enumerations, which I don't think we've done in any tutorial so far, before showing you how you can read an Outlook folder and get the messages from it, and then showing you how you can loop over the messages, downloading their attachments. At any point, you'll be able to click on the link at the top right of the screen to download any files or exercises to do with this tutorial. And you can also get at this link from the YouTube page if for some reason it doesn't appear. But that's enough from me. I'm going. And my colleague Sven will, as always, guide you through the rest of the tutorial. So let's get started. What's this tutorial about? Well, I've got here a very out-of-date help page for the different object models in the Microsoft Office applications, as they're called. So, for example, if you are going to write a program within Excel VBA, the object models or objects you're likely to be manipulating are things like workbooks and charts. If, by contrast, you're working within PowerPoint, the sort of things you'll be manipulating are presentations. And I could draw an analogy for each of these. So if you're working within Word, you'll be working within documents and characters and tables. If you're doing it within Project, you'll probably be working with timelines and Gantt charts, I'm not sure. And if you're doing it within Access, you'll be working with tables and record sets and so on. So each of these applications has got what's called a component object model. And the component object model, or COM for short, basically says what sort of thing that application provides, which you can manipulate in other programs. So, for example, it's perfectly possible to write a program in Excel, which will create a Word document, or to write a program in PowerPoint, which will bring information in from Access. So if the different Microsoft applications can talk to each other by using the things exposed by the component object model, why can't Python also use the things exposed by the component object model? And the answer is it can, and that's what this tutorial is about. So what I'm going to show you is how to write simple VBA programs within Python, and then how to translate existing programs and some of the issues you'll encounter when you try to do that. Just one last thing about this. I wouldn't watch this tutorial unless you're already familiar with VBA, because it does assume that you already know how to program in Visual Basic for applications. Okay, so let's get started with writing a simple VBA program. So I've created a simple file called simpleprogram excel.py, and what we're going to do is use this to create an Excel workbook and type your name into the top left cell, something like that, just as a proof of concept. So to do this, the first thing I need to do is import the necessary module, which is win32com.client. And regular viewers of this won't be surprised to know that that doesn't yet exist. And so what I need to do is go to a new terminal window, or an existing one, and type pip space install space pywin32. So it's not, you don't type in the same thing as the name of the module you import. And if I press return to run that, you'll see it's installing the modules I need. And it accepts win32com.client at the top now. So what I'm going to do is launch Excel from within Python. Quite an exciting thing to do, really. And to do that, I'm going to create a variable which I'll call Excel, and I'll set it equal to win32com.client.dispatch, and then in brackets what I need to do is specify the unique user handle or handle for that application. And I can do this by either typing in the number of it, which I'm unlikely to know, or by typing in the name, which is usually excel.application or word.application or something similar to that. So hopefully that will launch Excel. The next thing I'm going to do, I'll just shut that distraction down. The next thing I'm going to do is make it visible. And I can do that by saying excel.visible equals true. And the reason I need to do that is because otherwise I can do all the programming I like within Excel, but I'll never actually see the results on screen, which would be disappointing. So the next thing I'm going to do is to create a new workbook, Excel, and I'll call it New Book. And to do this, I can take the Excel application, I can take the workbooks collection within it, and apply the add method to it. And seasoned VBA programmers will be feeling a nice warm sense of reassurance at this point that I've just written in a fairly standard line of VBA code. The difference is I didn't have to, in fact I couldn't, dimension this variable as an Excel workbook. But there's another difference. You have to put open and close brackets after methods. So if you're copying this directly from VBA, it wouldn't work. So there's lots of little gotchas like that coming up. So what I can now do is type name into A1. So to do this, I can say excel.range value equals, and I'll put my name in, which is Wally Owl, or at least it is for the moment. Actually, it's Sven, isn't it? And that should now work. So what I'm going to try doing is running that program. I'll just close down any other Excel applications I may have open without saving them to make sure I've got a clean Excel. And if I run that program, you can see it does indeed create a new workbook and it types my name into the top left cell. So that's worked. And so that's how you can create a basic program in VBA from within Python. So I've done an example using Excel. Now let's create a program in Python which will create a new document in Word and type your name maybe or something similar to it in a new document. So to do this, I need again to import the win32com.client. And what I'll then do is launch Word. So I'll create a new variable, I'll call it WD, and I'll take win32.com.client and I'll dispatch, a very strange word for launching a program, I always think. And this time the unique name for the program is word.application. And then what I want to do is make that visible. It's very easy to forget that and very disappointing if you do. And you'll notice it doesn't come up with IntelliSense auto-completion. It could do, it just doesn't. I've included in the useful links.txt file a link to a very useful site which tells you absolutely everything about Python and COM. It's way beyond the scope of this little tutorial, this humble little tutorial, but it does explain how you can set Python up to use early binding and to get IntelliSense to appear. It's not for the faint-hearted, be warned, but it is possible. But I'm going to be happy with not having IntelliSense appearing. So I'll make this visible by setting the visible property to be true. I will add a document. So the command to do that in Word is documents.add. So all I need to do is prefix that with the containing application. But I also need to type in open and close brackets to make it into a method. Then I can type something in, and the command to do that is wd.selection.typetext, all of which you could get from IntelliSense within Word and then just copy into Python. And I think what I'm going to type in is my alter ego of Wilbur. And you can see that because this is a function, you have to put that in open and close brackets, which you wouldn't have to do in VBA. Okay, so let's try running that. And what you should, I hope, see is it creates a new document and types your name in, so there it is. So you've got complete control over all the different Microsoft Office applications. So let's have a look at taking an existing Excel program in VBA and porting it into Python and see what sort of obstacles you may overcome. So what I'd like to do now is to explain the example we're going to translate from Excel into Python. I've got my list of films here, and this file is a .xlsm file, so it contains macros, and it's attached to the list of files for this tutorial. And what I want to be able to do is to write a macro which will allow me to type in a film name, and it will go to it and change the number of Oscars. So for example, if I type in B movie and the number 5, it will go to the B movie, and what it will actually do is this. It will go from there to the end of the row, then it will go 2 cells back, and then it will change that number to whatever number of Oscars you've typed in. And the only reason I'm doing it that way is I want to show you going to the end of a block and offsetting as well. Otherwise, I could have done it more simply. Okay, so let's have a look at the code for this. Because I'm on Windows 11, I can split the screen like this. It's wonderful. And there's VBA. So what I'm going to do is just make sure you can see both of them at the same time. And let's try now running this. So what it will do is display an input box and ask me how many Oscars I want. Display another input box and ask me what film I want. It will go to the film sheet. The film sheet is just down here. So you can see that's one it's going to go to. And then it would set the film cell, and this is where I probably need to actually give a bit more room, to take the cells, which is all the cells in the spreadsheet, and find the film name I've typed in. So for example, I've typed in B movie, then film cell will refer to that cell. I'm going to assume I type sensibly. I don't type in the name of the film, which doesn't exist. There's no error trapping in this program. What it will then do is set film cell to be not that cell, but it will then go to the end to the right. So we'll go over to the right like that. And then it will set the value of the cell 0 rows down, 2 columns to the left, because I put a minus sign in. So set the value of that cell to be the number of Oscars I've typed in. Okay, so let's try running this. So if I'm going to press the F8 key to run it. And what that will let me do is step through it line by line. I'll say 7 Oscars. And then for the next question, I think we'll go for Beowulf, because I'm actually getting a bit sick of using the B movie as an example. And then if I press F8 again, it will go to the end of the block. And what it will now do, and I just need to convince you that this is going to work. When I press F8, it will change that number to 7. I don't know if you saw that happening, and then it will finish. So that's my program. And what I'm now going to do is copy it. There's no point copying the update Oscars because that won't work. But I'll copy the rest of it to my clipboard. And what we're going to do is have a go at getting this to work within Python. So I've created a file called translated Excel VBA.py. And the first thing we'll do is import the win32 com.client because we're going to need that. What I can now do, rather nervously, is paste in the VBA. And unsurprisingly, I get quite a few errors. There's a fair amount to do to clear this up. I'll select all that and press Shift-Tab, and what that will do is move it over to the left margin. There's no point whatsoever in declaring variables because you can't do it in Python. If I select this apostrophe, that denotes a comment in VBA. In Python, of course, it's a hash symbol. So I'll press Shift-Control-L and type in hash space, and then just press Escape to clear that so I'm back in normal typing mode. Input box is just input in Python. So again, I'll press Shift-Control-L, type in input, and then press Escape to clear that. You can't have more than one thing for the input as far as I know, and if you can, they don't mean what they mean in VBA, so I'll just get rid of that. Variables. Variables are in lowercase in Python, and it's a good idea to follow coding conventions. So what I'll do is select that, press Shift-Control-N again, type in my new variable name, which is number Oscars with an underscore, and then press Escape to clear that. I think I need to press it twice and then click somewhere else. For the film name, I'll do the same thing, Shift-Control-L. I'll type in film underscore name, and then when I've finished, I'll press Escape and clear it. Things are going well. Film cell, likewise, I probably need to rename. So Control L, type in film underscore cell, like that. So you can see I'm creating some other problems as I go along. What I now need to do is launch a new Excel copy of Excel and open up the file I'm working within. So to do that, let's launch Excel. So I'll set Excel, the variable called Excel equals, to win32com.client.dispatch, and I'll open up an Excel.application. I need to do that because in VBA within Excel, I was already working within the application, but now I'm writing this externally. So I need to make sure I've opened up an Excel application. And I also need to open up the correct workbook. So to do that, I'll create a variable called book, let's call it, and I'll specify excel.workbooks.open. So that's exactly analogous. In VBA, you would just type workbooks.open, and then in brackets, I can specify the name of the file I'm opening. And hopefully it's in my clipboard there. So that's the file I'm opening. Okay, so I've opened the file. I can get the number of Oscars, get the film name. I now try to select the film sheet. That's not working because I need to say which book it's within. So I need to put book.worksheets, and you can see the error disappears. When I'm getting where the film is, you can't use the word set. It doesn't exist. So I need to just put film cell. But I need to also prefix this with Excel to say that I'm looking for the cells collection within Excel rather than within Python. On this next line, I need to set film cell equals, and it doesn't like the word Excel to write, and there's a good reason for that. So I think I've stopped most of the problems. Let's look at that word Excel to write. So this is a constant in VBA. Now, I've read some things on websites which suggest you can replace it with win32.com.client.constants. And whether you type constant with a little c or constants with a big C, I cannot get it to then recognize any version of Excel to write. So it may be possible to do it that way, but I can't get it to. So instead of doing that, what I'll do is go to a search bar and I'll type in Excel VBA and Excel to write. And if I go to the Microsoft website for that, you can see it says range m property, represents a range object, and here's what I wanted, the directions I can go in. If I click on that, it's called an enumeration. And there's 4 possible directions. The one I want is to go right, and that corresponds to the internal number -4161. So what I can do is copy that. Probably you wouldn't have guessed that. Paste it into my gap there, and that will have exactly the same effect. I'm going to try running this once using the input function. It will be a bit messy, I think, but let's give it a go. So if I press Control F5, I can't use code runner because you can't have an input function with that. And if I type in here the number of Oscars, let's go for 55, and let's go for Beowulf. You can see I've got a few formatting issues with this. When I press return, has it actually worked? I can't see any evidence of it, and I find it very, very difficult to debug this. So I'm actually going to cheat. I'm going to take out the input statement, and for the moment, in fact, let's leave it in, but just comment it out. I'll set this to 42, and I'll just put a hash in front of it. For the film name, I'll set this to be Beowulf, and again, I'll put a hash in front of that. And I'm doing that because I want to use code runner because I find it very hard to debug otherwise. So if I now try running that, let's see if anything happens. And the answer to that question is emphatically no. I suspect a lot is happening. I just can't see it. What I've forgotten to do, rather foolishly, is to make it visible. So let's try adding in excel.visible equals true. Of course, I didn't need to do that in VBA and Excel because Excel is visible automatically. And let's try running that again. Now that looks more promising because at least I can see something in Excel. And you can actually see it's worked. It's changed the number to 42, except it's changed the wrong number. So it found Beowulf, it went to the right-hand side, and then it was meant to go 2 cells back to the left and on the same row. And it certainly failed to do that. And this is just the last piece of the jigsaw we need to solve. The reason that happens is because for some reason which completely escapes me and most other people, instead of using offset, you need to put get offset in. So there's something which you probably might not have guessed. And if you now try running that, you can see that it puts 42 as the Oscars for Beowulf. What all this shows is it is possible to take a VBA program and translate it into Python, but in doing so, you're going to have to solve quite a few little glitches along the way. But the good news is I think I've shown you the main ones you'll encounter. So the last part or parts of this tutorial are going to be devoted to working with Outlook. It's quite scary how easy it is in Python to download emails and even attachments from your Outlook PST file. You don't have to have Outlook open, which is the scary thing about it. So it seems to me to bypass all of the protection in place. But hey, if it's useful. So I've created a junk folder within my inbox, and I've copied 3 of the 7,366 unwanted emails into that. So I've got one which has an attachment, which is a Word document, one which has no attachments, and one which has 2 attachments, which are pictures. Incidentally, I'm not in any way meaning to promote these people. I wish they'd stop writing to me. So to begin this process, what I'm going to do is import a module into a new file I've created called outlook-attachments.py. So from the enum, which is a built-in module, I'm going to import enum. What on earth is enum? Well, I've got something on my clipboard, and for once I'm not going to type it in, I'm just going to paste it in, because this is something I haven't really explained, but it'll be obvious how to use it. This is called an enumeration, and what it does is allows me to refer to numbers in a more meaningful way. So for example, I could refer to the Outlook inbox as 6, but it's much easier to refer to it as OL folder inbox because it makes the code easier to read and easier to interpret. So as one example, if I wanted to print something out, I could print out the Outlook folder, could print out olfolder.inbox.value. And what that will do when I run the program is print out the number 6. So that's what an enumeration is. It's just a way of representing a built-in number which would otherwise be meaningless by a more descriptive bit of text. So what I'm going to do is to list out the messages in the folder, the junk folder, and then in a separate step, I'll list out their attachments. So I'll just get rid of my old print statement. And I think I'll do this using a function because I think otherwise the code will get quite hard to read. So I'll create one function which returns a list of the messages, and then maybe another which returns a list of the attachments within them. So let's start with the one to get a list of the messages. I'll call it get messages. It seems a good name. And I'll pass in the folder name, which will be the word junk in this case. I'll assume it's within the inbox. And that will be a string. And the whole function will spit out a list of messages to be constructed. So get, or return rather, a list of messages in given folder. So the first thing I need to do is import the win32com.client module. And then I need to start Outlook. So I can do this in the same way as I did with Excel and with Word. So I can set Outlook equals win32com.client.dispatch, and then it's called outlook.application. Up to that point, Outlook is just the same as Excel and Word, but then it gets a bit murkier because I need to get at the email within that. So Outlook contains emails and calendars and tasks and other things. And to do this, I'll create a variable which I'll call mappy for reasons which may become apparent. And I'll set this equal to Outlook. And within that, I will get a namespace called mappy. I can't remember what it stands for. I did Google it, something like messaging application programming interface or something like that. But basically it means you can get to the emails within Outlook. So now I've got that, I can get a reference to my folder. So I'm going to do this in 2 parts. Firstly, I'll get to the inbox. So I'll create a variable, why not call it inbox, which will take the mail part of Outlook and get a default folder. Which default folder? This one, Outlook folder, .ol folder, inbox, .value. So I could have just put the number 6 in there to do the same thing. So now I've got a reference to the inbox. I can get at the junk mail folder within that. That's a very bad comment because I'm implying it's always going to be called junk, but I've written the function in such a way I can refer to any subfolder of the inbox. So I'll create a variable called subfolder, and I'll set this equal to inbox. It has a collection of folders, and I want the item within that. Notice how strange the syntax is getting, called not junk, but folder name. That's what I passed it in as an argument. So with a bit of luck, I've finally got a reference to my actual folder. So what I now need to do is to get a list of the messages within that subfolder. Messages in this folder. And to do that, I'll create a variable called messages and set it equal to subfolder.items. I know the items will be messages because I know I'm working within the mappy namespace, so there won't be tasks or calendar appointments or anything else. Excellent. So now what I'm going to do is create a new list called emails, and this is the one I'll be returning from the function. And I'll loop over the messages, gradually adding them one by one into my list. If there aren't any messages, it will just return an empty list, which is fine. That's what I want to happen. So I'll loop over my messages, adding each to my list. So to do that, I can say, I'm going to call it M to keep it short. So for each message. And what I'll do is create a tuple message. I'll call it this message. And a tuple begins with open brackets. And when you're listing things in a tuple, you can put them on separate lines, and the Python linter will accept that. So I'm just going to create a tuple of anything I could conceivably think you might find useful. But there'll be no IntelliSense, so I need to make sure my typing's correct. So I'll start with the subject of the message, which is m.subject. Then I'll put the sender's email address. I'm not going to put comments in because I think it's pretty obvious what each of these means. I'll put who it was sent to. I won't bother with CC or BCC, but I think they're pretty obvious what they're called. Whether it's unread or not. The sent on date, which you have to get at in 2 parts like that. And I believe sent on is probably in lowercase there. You have to be careful. The body of the message, and any attachments. You'll notice the case is going all over the place, excuse me. That was an unintentional pun. So that will create a message. What I can now do is append that message to my list. So emails.append, pass in my message, which is now called this message. And with a bit of luck, at this point, I've got a list of messages. List of messages which my function will return. So what I can now do is call function to return messages. So I'll create a variable called msgs and set it equal to my function, which was called getMessages. I'll pass in the name of my folder, which was called junk, and then I will just print out my messages. And before I run this, it's extremely unlikely it will work the first time. When I was doing this practicing, I missed out that T. I'll just highlight it there because it cost me so much time. And what that meant is I got an error message, which was extremely hard to work out what was going on because it plunged me into the subcode for working with Outlook. So do be careful you've typed everything incorrectly. Okay, I'm procrastinating. Let's give it a go. So if I run that, you can see it gives me none. There are no messages. What I have done is I've forgotten to return my list of messages. So it will always return none because this function never returns anything. So what I need to do is add in a return statement, and I need to be very careful not to put it there because that's within my loop. So what it will do is build up the first message and then return just one message. So I need to be careful that I built up my entire list of messages and then return that. So I'll return my list. Return accumulated list of messages. And now if I try running that program, I think it will work a bit better and I'll see all my messages one after the other, although not in very particularly readable format. So what I now need to do is get the attachments. So to get the list of attachments is going to prove remarkably easy, I think. What I'm going to do is just copy this code to the clipboard because I think I'll need it in a second. And then one of the nice things about functions is you can collapse them like that. And that just makes your code easier to read because it doesn't clutter up everything else. So I've got my list of messages. What I now want to do is loop over these messages, attachments. And to do that, I can just say for each message in the list of messages, what I'll do is unpack the tuple containing the information about the email. To do that, this is where it's going to be useful having that code in my clipboard, because I'll just comment that out so I can have a reminder of what order I did things in, basically. So I'll create my variables: subject, sender, to, unread, sent on, body, and attachments. That should do. And I'll set those equal to this message. And because my tuple contained those 7 parts, it should automatically unpack it into 7 different variables. You could argue it was a bit unnecessary building up a tuple and then extracting it back out again. I could have done all this in one go, and you might well be right. So having extracted that, I'm just going to print out a little bit of debug to check this is working. So what I'll do is just print out my subject, just to see how things are going. And if I run that program, you can see I get my 3 subjects, so it's looking good. So all I now need to do is save the attachments. And to do this is so nice and easy. I can just say pretty much what you'd expect me to say. For each attachment in the list of attachments, and if there aren't any, it will just loop over an empty list and not do anything. Then I'll save this attachment. And to do that, I can say attachment dot save as a file. We need to put in, and then in quotation marks, I'm going to need to put in the path to the file. I'm getting this, I'll just close that down. I'm getting this from this folder. Just copy that and delete anything I had in there previously to prove this isn't a cheat. Path in there and follow it up. You also have to specify the file name. So I'm going to have to put attachment.filename. You could argue it should just use the same file name, but I don't actually think it does. And that, believe it or not, is that if I run that program now and go to my folder, you can see, quite incredibly, I think, it gives me a list of all the attachments and all the emails in that folder. And on that note of great success, I think this is a good time to end this tutorial on how you can use VBA from within Python using the win32com.client module.